For centuries, rule by the people was an impossible dream. Today it is real and under new invisible pressure. Democracy literally means people power, from the Greek words demos and kratos, government based on the will of ordinary citizens, not kings or algorithms. At its heart, democracy is about who decides how resources, risks, and opportunities are distributed in a society. History shows what happens when that power lies far from the people who depend on it. The Great Irish Famine makes this brutally clear. Potato blight ruined the crop, yet Ireland continued exporting grain and livestock to Britain. The land produced food, but not for the starving. This was not only a natural disaster, but a political decision about whose hunger mattered, shaped by distant rulers and economic ideology. Democracy grew as a revolt against this distance, a demand that those who bear the consequences must have a say in the decisions. Capitalism gives power to those with more money. Democracy insists on one person, one vote, political equality regardless of wealth. This principle of equality has never been given freely. It has been won through struggle in streets, courts, and workplaces. Democracy is not a machine built once and left alone. It is a dynamic process that must redefine itself with every economic and technological revolution. Today, the revolution is artificial intelligence. Algorithms shape what we see, what we fear, and what we think everyone else believes. The old question of who allocates resources now has a twin. Who designs the systems that allocate our attention and our sense of truth? To see what is at stake, we return to democracy's first great experiment, a hillside in ancient Athens where citizens argued in person about war, taxes, and survival. Their democracy meant standing in the sun, speaking under your own name, and directly voting on how to use the city's shared resources. The story of democracy has always been a struggle over who counts and who decides. It began in Athens, but it did not end there. Athens, the first assembly. Before AI and nation-states, a small city tried the radical idea that ordinary citizens could govern themselves. In the 5th century BCE, Athens had perhaps 250,000 people, but only around 30,000 free adult men counted as citizens with political rights. These citizens met in the ecclesia, the assembly, many times a year on the Mix Hill to debate laws, war, and the budget in direct democracy. A famous debate began in 483 BCE when rich silver seams were found at the Laurian mines. Should the windfall be divided among citizens or used to build warships? Many Athenians wanted a per-person payout. Themistocles urged investing in a fleet of triremes that could defend the city. The assembly chose ships. That democratic budget choice created the navy that later defeated Persia at Salamis and protected Athenian independence. For poor rowers, the decision meant steady pay and status instead of a one-time payout. Democracy here was about concrete life chances in a dangerous world. Athenians also feared permanent rulers. Many offices and juries were assigned by lot using devices like the Clarotarian, a stone randomizer. They believed freedom meant to rule and be ruled in turn, not to be governed forever by a separate political class. Yet the Athenian people excluded most people. Women, enslaved workers, and resident foreigners who sustained the city had no political voice. The Laurian mines, whose silver funded the democracy, were worked by enslaved laborers, some of them children, far from the assembly's debates. Athens shows a paradox: democracy for a narrow group resting on harsh exploitation of others. People power sat atop unequal power. The Athenian democracy did not gently evolve. It was broken by Macedonian conquest, proof that external force can end self-rule in an instant. Still, Athens left a powerful idea: that ordinary citizens could decide how collective resources were used, and that power should not harden into a permanent caste. Later chapters of democracy pushed that idea outward beyond one city and beyond free men to workers, the poor, and finally women. Each step required struggle. Who counts as the people? In Rhode Island and London, the 19th century turned democracy into a mass struggle over suffrage. In early 1800s, Rhode Island, an old colonial charter, let only substantial property owners vote. Many white workers and most black men were excluded. Thomas Dorr helped organize a people's convention that drafted a new constitution, extending suffrage to nearly all white men and to black men as well. The charter government declared this illegal, and the conflict escalated into the Dorr Rebellion, a confused uprising over who had authority to define the electorate. Dorr lost and went to prison, but pressure forced change. Rhode Island soon adopted a new constitution that greatly broadened the franchise for native-born men. Across the Atlantic, British workers powered the Industrial Revolution, yet after the 1832 Reform Act, most still had no vote. The Chartist movement responded with the People's Charter demanding universal male suffrage, secret ballots, and equal electoral districts. Parliament rejected their petitions again and again. In the short term, elites held the line, but the rejected demands slowly became law. The 1867 Reform Act extended the vote to many urban working-class men. Later reforms in 1918 and 1928 moved Britain toward universal adult suffrage, including women. Women had to fight for decades, facing ridicule, violence, and prison before they could cast the same vote as their male neighbors. In both the United States and Britain, political equality expanded only when those excluded organized, disrupted, and forced elites to negotiate. Universal suffrage did not end power asymmetries, but it changed who could punish leaders for neglect and corruption and put survival and dignity on the ballot. Economist Amartya Sen later argued that functioning democracies with a free press do not experience large-scale famines because leaders who ignore hunger can be voted out. To test this claim, we must look at places where famine did strike and ask what governments chose to do or not to do. Ethiopia, Botswana, and Bangladesh faced food crises in the late 20th century under very different political regimes and with very different outcomes: democracy and hunger. When crops fail, does political power decide who lives and who dies? In the mid-1980s, Ethiopia suffered a devastating famine that killed hundreds of thousands under the authoritarian Derg regime. Drought mattered, but so did politics. The government poured resources into war and forced relocations that worsened the famine. Human rights investigations concluded that government abuses made the famine earlier, harder, and wider than natural causes alone. At roughly the same time, drought also hit Botswana, a multi-party democracy that managed to avoid famine despite severe drops in rainfall. Botswana relied on early warning systems, targeted food distribution, and public works employment under a government sensitive to electoral accountability. In Bangladesh, the 1974 famine came less from absolute food shortage than from floods, job loss, and rising prices that destroyed poor people's ability to buy food. Sen's entitlement theory argued that people starve when their ability to command food collapses, even if national food stocks look adequate. In democracies with a free press, leaders know that famine images will fill front pages and television screens, and that voters can punish inaction. Democracy does not stop all suffering, but it changes incentives and makes mass hunger a political liability, not just a private misfortune. This protective power depends on reliable information. Citizens must know there is a crisis and be able to publicly blame those in charge. When information is censored or drowned out, the democratic feedback loop breaks and hunger can return because accountability fails. In the age of AI, the stakes of information are even higher. Deepfakes, bots, and personalized feeds can distort reality long before voters reach the ballot box. Yet AI is not only a threat. Used differently, it can help rebuild the informational foundations of democracy if citizens control the tools. Next, we look at digital experiments from Taiwan's online assemblies to AI mediators to see how technology might deepen rather than replace self-rule. Now, look at the digital democracy experiments. In Taiwan, citizens used online tools not just to shout, but to draft laws together. The vTaiwan process, launched in 2015, combines platforms such as Paul.is with face-to-face meetings to crowdsource policy on topics like telemedicine and ride-sharing. Paul has asked people to agree, disagree, or pass on statements, then uses machine learning to cluster opinions and highlight surprising areas of consensus. In the UberX case, thousands participated online, surfacing shared demands such as fair insurance and transparent pricing that shaped regulation. Over time, more than 200,000 people took part in vTaiwan processes, contributing to dozens of national policy decisions. Here, technology is not a substitute for politics, but an amplifier of deliberation, replacing comment section shouting with structured evidence of convergence. Another experiment is the Habermas machine developed by DeepMind, an AI system that helps small groups draft consensus statements on controversial topics. In studies, participants often preferred AI-generated consensus statements to those written by human mediators, rating them clearer and fairer. The system is not neutral, but it suggests AI can act as a deliberative mediator, weaving minority concerns into shared text instead of only pushing ads. Elsewhere, large language models with retrieval augmented generation answer citizen questions about complex policy documents in plain language. These systems draw on official texts, then generate tailored answers, reducing the advantage that lawyers and lobbyists have in understanding legislation. In Europe, projects use LLMs to help policymakers and journalists explore thousands of public comments on draft regulations, making participation more legible. Used this way, AI could lower barriers of language, education, and time, helping more people understand, criticize, and reshape public policy. But each tool raises democratic questions. Who designs the algorithms, who audits them, and whose voices and languages get filtered out? Digital democracy is not just adding AI to politics. It is bringing transparency, contestation, and equality into AI systems themselves. Now let's think about AI, power, and the next democratic struggle. The same tools that aid deliberation can also supercharge propaganda and control. AI-generated deepfakes can create convincing videos of riots, election fraud, or fabricated speeches that spread faster than fact-checkers can react. Investigations show how such tools can be prompted to fabricate realistic political unrest, despite watermarks that can be cropped or obscured. UN-linked reports call for strong measures and common standards to detect and label deepfakes across platforms before elections. Platforms such as Meta report dismantling covert influence operations that use fake accounts and AI content to manipulate political conversations. Surveys suggest the rise of deepfakes and generative scams is already eroding trust in governments and media as people doubt what they see. Authoritarians gain a double weapon. They can flood the space with lies and dismiss genuine evidence as just another deepfake when it implicates them. The danger is not only spectacular lies, but quiet, personalized shaping of feeds, micro-targeted messages tuned to each individual's fears and hopes. This creates a new inequality, not just of income, but of reality. The rich and powerful can buy custom worlds aligned with their interests. Manipulation is not new. Pamphlets, radio, and television were all used to mislead as well as inform. AI mainly makes these tactics cheaper and faster. What is new is the concentration of computational power. A few governments and corporations control models that can influence millions of minds at once. If democracy means decentralizing power, then the struggle now is over. Who owns and governs the AI infrastructure itself? Proposals include transparency about training data, independent audits, bans on certain manipulative deepfakes, and citizen assemblies on AI policy. Without such safeguards, AI may become to our democracies what the Laurian mines were to Athens, a source of power built on invisible exploited labor. Democracy has always been a fight over food, votes, and whose voice counts. In the age of AI, that fight continues. Who decides and how many of us remain truly human in that decision?